There is something to be said about humanity and music. For some reason, and we know the reason, but we have a desire for music and a love for it. We can have different tastes, but you're going to find people around the world like music and will be doing something. They may be humming, they may be singing, they may be whistling, they may be listening to somebody else. But everywhere on the earth, in every culture, you're going to find music. And only in times when it may be stamped out by a power, and truly that does happen. People will express themselves musically, and even if it's just by themselves or at work or with a group working. You had things such as sea shanties, which was a bunch of men on a ship and they would sing the sea shanties as they were working. You have songs that might be sung in a field, or songs sung in a coal mine, or songs sung among women who were harvesting grain or whatever they're harvesting. There is always song with humanity. And why would that be? I mean, from an atheist evolutionary standpoint, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Matter of fact, evolution and beauty doesn't make any sense. There shouldn't be any form or even any acknowledgement of beauty. That shouldn't even be there. But there is. That's because God put it here. And there are things like music because God put it here. And there are things such as our appreciation for it because God put that in us as well. And that there is a connection between music and worship to God. Because God does demand that out of us. And we're going to see that in the future as well. Let's just begin with Psalm 96. We'll go to Psalm 96, and here we're going to see that God created us to serve Him and also to worship Him, to glorify Him and praise Him. And part of that is done in song. Psalm 96. Oh, sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord, all the earth. Sing to the Lord, bless His name. Proclaim the good news of His salvation from day to day. Declare His glory among the nations, His wonders among the people. For the Lord is great and greatly to be praised. He is to be feared above all gods, and all the gods of the peoples are idols. But the Lord made the heavens. Honor and majesty are before Him. Strength and beauty are in His sanctuary. Now, what am I reading? Actually, I'm reading a psalm. Psalms, actually, though we don't know what the tune may be, all of them were set to a tune. Every one of them were set to some tune. Now, that tune hasn't come down to us because that's not the important part of it. The words are the important part. But notice, there are 150 psalms in the Bible. Those are 150 songs that have been put in. Now, some of them read very much like Proverbs. Some of them do. Some of them are prophecies. Some of them are straight praise. That's precisely what they are. Some read like prayers because that's what they are. They are prayers. Why are you so far away from my groanings? Or there is no help in God for him. There are psalms that express so many things of joy, of grief, of fear, of relief. All of it is in here. Why would God be so... why would He include this in the Bible? Because He too is interested in song and to be worshiped in song. That's not the only way He's worshiped, but that is one way among the ways He is worshiped. That is part of how He is worshiped. And note in the first verse of this, "Oh, sing to the Lord a new song." And that's what we're going to discuss this evening. This idea of a new song. Because while we can give credit to David for the number of psalms that he wrote, and Solomon actually has at least one in here. Moses has at least one in here. And then there are others that we don't know exactly who they are. They may carry a name, they may not carry a name. But in all of them, all 150 psalms, while we can give credit to Moses or to David or to any of those others who did that, it was who that inspired it? It was God. This isn't necessarily the creativity of man. This is the expression of God put down. This is the expression of God that He put down, that He had His writers, whether it's David or whomever it was, He had them put it down. Now, let's go to Isaiah. We go from here to Isaiah 42. And you're going to have to excuse me this evening. I do not have my things marked as I normally do. Isaiah 42, and beginning in verse 10. Sing to the Lord a new song, and His praise from the ends of the earth. You who go down to the sea and all that is in it, you coastlands and you inhabitants in them. Let the wilderness and its cities lift up their voice. The villages that Kedar inhabits, let the inhabitants of Selah sing. Let them shout from the top of the mountains. And here is this idea, as we can get from some of the Psalms as well, this idea of the entire world join in. The entire world sing praises to God, and that is expected. That is what God desires out of us, that we can express a love, we can express a praise, we can glorify Him in song. We can glorify Him. But here is this idea of a new song. And I just want to make mention of some things concerning what this term new song, because I've already sort of hinted at it. But what I believe is referred to as a new song is not one that man just decides to make a new song per se. But, well, let's go to some places first. Let's go to Exodus. Exodus 15. Exodus 15. And I just want you to see this in action. Exodus chapter 15. And this is directly after the Red Sea crossing. And we notice, so Israel just crossed the bottom of the Red Sea, dry ground. The Egyptians follow after them in hot pursuit. And then as the Israelites are now on land, the Red Sea now collapses. The two walls now come right back together, and the Egyptian army is instantaneously, it's just crushed by that weight. There's no rising from that, no telling how deep it is, but all that water suddenly on top of you would be a tremendous weight. And you're down and you're not coming back up. But notice, here in chapter 15, verse 1, then Moses and the children of Israel sang this song to the Lord and spoke, saying, I will sing to the Lord, for He has triumphed gloriously. Now notice what it says. Moses and the children of Israel sang this song to the Lord. Who wrote it? That's my question. Who wrote it? Because it doesn't say, but it appears as though all of them know this song. But it's a new song. It's never been written before. They didn't have this occasion before. It's for this occasion. Who wrote it? Personally, and you can disagree with me, personally, I think it's inspired. I think they were singing this song together, having never heard it before, having never rehearsed it before. They were doing it. Now, you can disagree with me, but I think that's part of what is meant by a new song, in all this, something that we can't really do. Not like this, because obviously they are inspired. Let's go to Judges chapter 5. So from this point over to the book of Judges. Judges chapter 5. And here we have what is known as the Song of Deborah. This is after the victory over the Amalekites and over the you have the death of Sisera and their victory over them. And verse 1, so Judges 5 verse 1, then Deborah and Barak the son of Abinoam sang on that day, saying, when leaders lead in Israel, when the people willingly offer themselves, bless the Lord. I think this too is inspired. Well, one, it's in the Bible, so it's got to be inspired. All right? Now, it has to be more than just a record of this is what they say. I think it's more than that. I think this is very much like David writing one of his Psalms. That he is inspired word for word in all this. And I think this is the expression that is coming through inspiration altogether. Now, if we turn from this point to the book of Luke, we're going to see the same thing occurring. Something spontaneously being spoken or being said. So we go to Luke chapter 1. Luke 1, and this is where Mary is carrying the Christ. He hasn't been born yet. And Elizabeth is carrying his cousin, John the Baptist. He's not been born yet. And here, this is the point where Mary goes and visits Elizabeth. And we see this in verse 46. So Luke 1, verse 46, and Mary said, my soul magnifies the Lord. This is poetry. This is poetry. I don't think this is the way that Mary spoke all the time. I think that she would have had a very, very common sort of approach to language like everyone had. But for this, suddenly she's saying these words. And my spirit has rejoiced in God my Savior, for He has regarded the lowly state of His maidservant. For behold, henceforth all generations will call me blessed. For He who is mighty has done great things for me, and holy is His name. I think that these are inspired words that have been given to her, and she is stating them out. Because she has been, in fact, told that she is blessed. She's told that by Gabriel and wondered, what kind of greeting is this? What does this even mean? And she kept these things in her heart. Now she is speaking these out. And I don't think she's really making it up. I think these words were formed in heaven and they're sent through her by way of inspiration. That's what I think. Now, we cannot do that. Someone has to write the words, write the tune, just like we have in our hymnal, and then it can be sung. It can be sung. And that was not an uncommon thing at all. That's what Israel was doing. They would have had plenty of songs that simply were not inspired. Plenty of hymns, not inspired, and therefore are not included in the Bible. They don't need to be. And there would have been plenty of hymns or whatnot, hymns sung in the New Testament church that we don't have those words because they didn't need to be included. But there are certain things that are included. Those have to be inspired, given to us in this. Now, as we see from that of Psalm and from Isaiah, we are made to serve and praise God, and that goes past, present, and future. Let's go to Ephesians now, Ephesians 5:19. Very familiar verse to us. Ephesians 5:19. And we have these words, and these are words of command. And their words, the verbs used in this are for everybody. Just insert your name in it, that you are involved in it as well. Speaking to one another That's speaking to one another. That's the way it's rendered in English. I'm reading from the New King James. Speaking to one another is trying to relay the idea, the message of this word, that everyone is involved in this. Everyone, there's not a single person that is omitted. Now, obviously, someone who is mute cannot do this. Someone currently having laryngitis cannot do this or not do it so well. Okay? But for the rest of us, this is what we are to be doing. Speaking to one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your hearts to the Lord. And we have very similar statement in Colossians 3:16. Very similar, of telling us what is required in worship when it comes to music in worship. That it's psalms, hymns, spiritual songs. Everything else is excluded. There are some songs that have been in hymns that I don't know why they were put in there, because clearly that's not a hymn. Clearly it's not. Because something has to be taught, and it has to be biblical. And it can't be just a feel-good kind of song. Something must be taught. God must be glorified in some way. Something has to be biblically sound about it for it to be included in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. Because we teach, we speak to each other, we teach each other, we try to encourage each other, and there's also that admonition that's in there as well. That all comes in to the songs and praise, all comes into songs that we are to sing in worship. Now, let's go to Revelation chapter 5. Revelation 5 and verse 13. No, I'm sorry, Revelation 5 and verse 9. Revelation 5 and verse 9. And they sang a new song, saying, now this is directed at Christ. They sang a new song. You are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals. For you were slain and have redeemed us to God by your blood. Okay, note. Angels cannot say that Jesus redeemed us to God by your blood. Because Christ didn't come here to help angels. And His death has nothing to do with angels. It has everything to do with us. Everything. This is a song truly that is from these, you have these 24 elders that have fallen before the throne. And you have this golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints, showing that this is all in a lot of symbolic language. Out of every tribe and tongue and people and nation, and have made us kings and priests to our God, and we shall reign on earth. They are speaking fact. It is truth that they are expressing, and they are expressing it in song. And John sees it, and he records it. They are singing this song, this new song that is there, and it would appear like these things are just absolutely spontaneous. That everyone knows it, everyone sings it, no one has to rehearse, no one has to practice, no one has to learn this song. They just know it. And we go to Revelation chapter 14. This is with the 144,000. 144,000 is a symbolic number for the saved. All right, that the 144,000 is not designated a specific group in heaven. That's those who occupy heaven. That's all the righteous from first to last. That's the 144,000. It's not a literal number. at all. It's a symbolic number. That's what it is. A thing of completeness. And as we have said before, God, because I feel like we need to address this when we come across these things, God is not going to give you the absolute number of those who are going to be in heaven. He's not going to do it. I'll show you. I'll show you just very, very quickly. Because in Revelation chapter 7, you have 144,000, that idea introduced in chapter 7. And then all the tribes of Israel that are sealed with, that of 12,000. 12,000 were sealed from the tribe of Reuben and 12,000 from Gad. And all in all, it makes up 144,000. But then we see John, after this idea of 144,000, verse 9, after these things I looked and behold a great multitude which no one could number. No one could number. Of all nations, tribes, peoples, and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes and palm branches in their hands. So after saying it's 144,000, he's saying now it's a number no one knows. There's too many that are there, and they're from every nation. That would include Israel in every nation. And there's not the 144,000 and then everybody else, and you can't number the everyone else. The 144,000 is all. And it is a number, it represents a large number, actually a complete number, and what John sees is more than he could possibly number. They are the ones who are from every tribe, every tongue. Now we go back to chapter 14, if you will, and in verse 3. They sang, as it were, a new song before the throne, before the four living creatures and the elders, and no one could learn that song except the 144,000 who were redeemed from the earth. It's not revealed to anyone else but the 144,000. And the 144,000, that is all the redeemed. All. It doesn't exclude anyone in heaven. It's everyone, all of humanity residing in heaven for eternity. This is this group that sings this new song. They sing this new song. I heard a preacher, it's been a few years ago, saying that he just wanted to be able to hear that song, that he didn't have to be in the 144,000, he just wanted to hear that song. And my thought is, if you're not in the 144,000, you're not going to hear that song. You're not going to hear it at all. And notice what it says, that it is for one, it's for them only. They're the ones who are going to be doing this. And here's this new song. They are singing it, and they are singing it where? At the throne of God. That's where it is. So here is past. We talked about that of Psalm and also Isaiah. Present with that of both Colossians and Ephesians, speaking of how God is to be worshipped today in song. And then in the future, with now what John has seen in the future, and it is the redeemed in heaven. He sees this. And this is what we are going to do. I introduced this subject years ago, and I know that there were some listening then who did not like the thought of it. I know it. They didn't say anything to me, but I know they did. If you do not like worshiping God in this life, what makes you think you want to be worshiping Him in eternity? If you don't like it now, if it's a dull drudgery to you now, what do you think it's going to be in eternity? Now, being in hell is going to be extremely bad. That is, we just call that not an option. But there is an option. The option would be learn to appreciate, learn to have respect and reverence to God, which was the lesson from this morning. Learn to have that kind of reverence. Learn to want to worship, to desire to worship Him. As we have, actually it's in our on our bulletin quite often, and I just leave it there. I change it every now and then. But going to Psalm 122, verse 1. Psalm 122. I was glad when they said to me, let us go into the house of the Lord. That is an expression of David. Now, yes, he's inspired, but it would be a truth. I was glad when they said to me, let us go into the house of the Lord. Well, why? Because there is salvation and there is God. God who is above all. How is it, let's just use this line of logic, how is it that the one who created all things, including you, and you as an individual, and you are an individual, you and your soul, and your body, your existence. You can't come into existence. You can't spring into existence on your own. You can't do it. Our parents couldn't do it. Their parents couldn't do it. Adam and Eve couldn't do it. The one who created us all, is He not worthy of worship? Now, what if He created us for that very reason? And other reasons as well. He's glorifying Him beyond just acts of worship. What if it was to glorify Him in all that we do and to be obedient to Him in every respect? And speaking of respect, respecting Him, reverencing Him. What if He created us to do all that? Who am I to, and who are you to say, no, I'm not going to do that? Now you can. It's extremely unwise. There's a song, it was Jimmy Hill who told me about it. It was a song that he had learned, I think it was in Zambia. And it was being sung in the Zambian language, whatever that language that is. And he didn't quite understand what the song was about because he knew that there were some unusual things about it. And he asked someone, what was that song about? And the song was about how everything in creation does precisely what God wants it to do except man. Everything does. Whether it's the sun, or whether it's a cow, or whether it's a dog, everything behaves and does precisely what it's supposed to do except man. And we are different, and we can say no. And all too often, people say no. All too often. To great grief and agony. And it can be resolved. It can be resolved very quickly by the will. Now, let's go to Isaiah. From this point, we go to Isaiah chapter 1. Isaiah 1, and beginning in verse 12. He is to be regarded as holy. And our worship, understand this, our worship to Him does not justify a bad lifestyle. There's a song, I'm not going to sing the song, it's an old blues song. And it goes through the days of the week. And then basically getting to Saturday night, doing what I please, and I'm going to party, I'm going to do all these things. And then Sunday, I'm going to go to worship and ask for forgiveness. And then, of course, we come back to Monday again, and it's down the same path. And when did going to worship justify a bad lifestyle? It doesn't. It doesn't. Someone can be very faithful in worship, but if their lifestyle is not according to Christ's will and His desire for all of us, then what is that worship? What is that worship to Him? So we come to Isaiah 1, in verse 12, when you come to appear before me, who has required this from your hand to trample my courts? Bring no more futile sacrifices. Incense is an abomination to me. The new moons, the Sabbaths, and the callings of assemblies. I cannot endure, notice this, I cannot endure iniquity and the sacred meetings. Now, we just ask, were they not to appear before Him? Were they not to bring sacrifices? Because I can go back and I can look at places like Leviticus. I can go to Exodus and I can see where there are sacrifices that are to be made. But notice what he says in all this. They are doing these things, but it's an abomination because he says, I cannot endure iniquity. They, on one hand, they bring their sacrifices, they make the observances, they do all these things, but on the other hand, they behave however they want. On the other hand, verse 14, your new moons and your appointed feasts, my soul hates, they are a trouble to me. I am weary of bearing with them. When you spread out your hand, I will hide my eyes from you. Even though you make many prayers, I will not hear you. Your hands are full of blood. They're a wicked lot. Worship Jehovah, well, it was their intent to, I suppose, at least in appearance. Did they glorify Him outside of worship? No. Obedient to Him outside of the assembly? No. Their hearts were not with Him. They did not love Him, nor His words at all. Their hands are full of blood, yet they would still go to the assemblies, yet they would still make these sacrifices. And He says, I abhor them. I do not want them at all. And let's go to 1 Corinthians, if you will. 1 Corinthians. And we go to chapter 11 and verse 17. 1 Corinthians 11 and 17. And this is addressing, as we very well know, Paul is addressing the church at Corinth. These are Christians that meet together on the first day of the week in Corinth. This is the church. And he says, now in giving these instructions, I do not praise you, since you come together not for the better, but for the worse. It would have been better because of their misbehavior, because of their abuse of what God desired out of worship, and they did abuse it. Because of their abuse of that, it would have been better if they had stayed home than to be here. Because of the envy, strife, division. Because of the splintering into different denominations is what they're splintering off into. Following different directions, following different creeds, if you will, or different gospels. That's what was happening in here. And there's all kinds of wickedness, one right after another. And it's hard to keep track of all the things that somebody got wrong in that congregation. And I'm surprised that they're still under one roof. But he says, you come together not for the better, but for the worse. Why? Because they weren't worshiping God as they should be, and their lives were not right. In this congregation, they are protecting sins. As we would say, they're circling the wagons around a man who's clearly in sin, and everybody knows it. They're protecting him, though. Brother takes another brother to court. You have abuse of the Lord's Supper. It becomes something strange and very worldly. They are also in an attitude of either envying someone or wanting to be envied. One of those two things. There were numerous things wrong with them. And they simply, in that sort of attitude and that sort of life and that sort of if that's the way you're going to be, it's best you just stay home. Now the better way is correct it, which is precisely what he is writing to them. That's why he's writing to them, is to correct all those things. correct everything about them. Now, concerning our worship to God, God designed us to worship Him. Why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we? We make the analogy of, if I go and I buy some kind of power tool, I expect the power tool to do exactly what it's designed to do. I expect it to do that. I don't want it to decide that this drill now wants to be a toaster. Well, you're a terrible toaster, and that's not what I want you to do anyway. I want you to do this. Mankind can do the same thing, of not wanting to worship God in the least, but to worship something else, including, but not limited to, themselves. Let's look at our lives. Look at ourselves. God wants us in heaven eternally with Him. That's what He wants. That's why He sent His Son. If it were a minor thing, nothing would have been done. But it's not minor with God. He wants us with Him. And that does mean a desire to worship Him. It does mean that. It is a desire also for spirit, to worship Him in spirit and truth. Completely. As He has called us to do and has guided us so that there is no question. Everything concerning worship is answered: who, what, when, where, how. It's all answered. Every question is answered. And so we look at ourselves knowing that what we do, we're going to be held responsible for doing it. Everything we do. And we need to ask the question, is your name in the book of life? Is your name there? Because you want it there. You want your name there, because that is the list of those who will be brought into heaven, where Christ has made a place for you. By personal design, and our designer is perfect at it. And it's designed for you, and it's designed for all the righteous. We ask this evening that we look at our lives, look at ourselves, what adjustments need to be made, what needs to be taken out and what needs to be brought in. Look at our lives, because we will be judged, and we're one day closer to that, and it will arrive. Predictably, not knowing the date, but it's going to arrive. And we ask this evening, if you need to respond to the invitation, if we can help you in any way, if you need the prayers of the congregation, we ask that you come as we stand and sing.